Hello, this is Gail Schwartz with the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania. I want to thank you all for coming to today's webinar. So we are here to talk about the state of eviction in Cumberland County. So this event today would not be happening without the amazing partnership of the Cumberland County Bar Association. So I do want to start off by saying thank you to them. They have been instrumental in getting the word out to make sure that you all are here with us today. So with that, I do just want to go ahead and get started and let you know a little bit about me, about the Housing Alliance, and about some of the great discussion that we are going to have here today. Okay. So the Housing Alliance is a statewide nonprofit membership organization that's really dedicated to increasing access to safe and affordable homes for all Pennsylvanians. We're a membership organization, and the diversity of our membership provides us with a unique perspective on a range of housing issues, including eviction. Our members include low-income renters, organizations serving low-income renters, organizations serving people experiencing homelessness, housing developers, housing authorities, local and state governments, and our members also include rental property owners and landlords. The Housing Alliance and our members recognize the need for a balance between the needs and interests of landlords, tenants, and the community to achieve strong and healthy rental market as well as neighborhoods. Landlords and tenants' needs are often viewed to be at odds with one another, that you have to be on one side or the other, and that one side can only get what they need at the sacrifice of the other. But we at the Housing Alliance do not believe this is actually true. We believe that we all have common goals when it comes to rental housing and the people who are renting that housing. We want all tenants living in quality, fair-priced homes who can make their rent and be a good neighbor for years to come. But with so many eviction filings happening every year, it is becoming evident that eviction is not the result of bad choices or bad tenants or bad landlords. It really is the result of a system that is failing to address the common barriers to housing stability. So with that, we want to have a conversation today about, what are the strategies that we can be using to disrupt the eviction process and really help stabilize both tenants as well as the landlords who are reliant on that important rental income. So eviction is a traumatic event that really sends ripples throughout the community. For tenants, they lose their home, their sense of security, their belongings, and there is a potential to also lose employment and struggle academically. We also see the likelihood of experiencing homelessness increase. For landlords, the lost rental income and expense is never going to be recouped. For schools, evictions drive high turnover in classrooms and poor performance for involuntarily displaced students. And for employers, it increases job turnover and, really hurts the reliability that they have on their employees. And lastly, eviction weakens and frays the social fabrics of neighborhoods and communities. But eviction is a process. It's not a singular event. It is a legal process that can take a few weeks to a few months to play out. Because eviction is a process with different phases, there is opportunity to disrupt and slow the process with different types of interventions at different points, all with the intention of keeping tenants stably housed and landlords financially whole. A number of these interventions require collaboration and cooperation from key stakeholders, such as local courts, social service providers, and state and local decision makers. So what I have here on the screen is just a some key terms that we are going to be referencing as we talk about when and how you can disrupt the eviction prevention process. So first is landlord-tenant mediation. Mediation is a strategy that can help de-escalate landlord-tenant disputes by removing them from the intensity of the courtroom and allowing them to work with a neutral third-party mediator to explore the conflict from both sides and empower them to resolve the conflict, which also can potentially result in not only stopping the eviction, but also restoring the very important business relationship between the tenant and the landlord. Another key term that we're going to reference is, of course, expanding access to legal representation. Legal services definitely traditionally has served this role, but however, it is a resource that is greatly oversubscribed. And in some communities, which we'll hear about later, they have explored other avenues to help those who cannot be served by legal services. And so, again, allowing for an approach that allows tenants to consult with a practicing attorney really helps them, just better understand their rights, their choices, and their responsibilities as they go through the process. Another thing we're going to talk about is additional information provided to tenants in simple terms to help understand where they are in the eviction process. We're really talking about what is the important information that is needed when we are notifying people about where they are in the eviction process and making sure that it's not just being shown in kind of that confusing legalese, but it's also in very plainly understood terms. And then, of course, we're going to be talking about partnerships. Excuse me. These partnerships really help align the resources that are needed to help connect people with rental assistance, to address any arrears, to help people get connected to the resources to help address what are the underlying causes of eviction, because usually it's more than just, forgetting to pay the rent. And then also in those instances where, maybe somebody's not going to get evicted, but it's still clear that they're not going to be successful in that current housing situation, helping them transition in a less traumatic way to their next home opportunity. And then, courts are incredibly important partners in helping advertise what resources are out there in the community that can support both tenants and landlords. And really, asking courts to promote alternative dispute resolutions, such as landlord-tenant mediation, but as well as giving, pretty clear guidance so that there's, a consistent understanding across all districts of, what are good faith efforts to resolve a breach of lease that should really be taken into consideration when rendering a judgment in an eviction case. So now we want to just take a couple of minutes to look at the eviction process map. As you can see, there are many different steps, starting with the notice to quit. In the state of Pennsylvania, it is allowed for leases to include a waiver of the notice to quit. Usually, if a notice to quit is given, if it's for non-payment of rent, it's a 10-day notice. If it's for some other breach of lease, it's for 15 days if the tenant's been there for a year or less, or 30 days if they've been there for longer than a year. But, if there's a waiver of that notice to quit, then really, the landlord can go to court right away, and that kind of misses a really golden opportunity to address and connect somebody to resources. So, once the notice to quit expires, then the landlord can go to court. A summons is served, there's a hearing, if the judgment is in favor of the tenant, then they get to stay. If not, chances are money is going to be awarded to the landlord. But again, this is just a promise to pay the landlord a set amount. It doesn't mean, that the tenant really has it in that moment to give. So sometimes a lot of cases end in what's called a pay and stay. And so, if a tenant's able to connect to resources and get some help, then they will be able to, pay the landlord and stay in the apartment. But if not, then the landlord can file for possession of the property. And that's, when there's a 2-week window, and then, somebody like the constable or the sheriff comes out and, actually forcibly removes somebody. So that's kind of the process in a nutshell. And I will say I am not a lawyer. So if there's any lawyers on today's webinar and something a little bit different, please feel free to share that information with me. And of course, if you're a provider who's actively supporting somebody in the eviction process, please be sure to actually get true legal advice from an attorney. So again, sort of these circles are looking at where we at the Housing Alliance understand to be points in this process where we can kind of really disrupt it. And so, that's at the very beginning when the notice to quit is given, because really that's when the tenant is first starting to struggle, right? Landlords are always the first to know when their tenants are struggling because they're not getting paid. So there's a great opportunity for getting help to tenants at that point. Of course, when filing the complaint, when the summons is served, during the hearings, even, appeals process and things like that afterwards. So we're going to go through each of these points and just talk about the ways in which we can disrupt the process. So looking at the notice to quit, one of the great resources that are really good to use early on in the process is the landlord-tenant mediation. Again, this is something that's really designed to take place outside of the classroom, outside of the courtroom, to really help people, unpack what the issue is and also identify what the underlying causes are and help them come to the resolution and the agreement that's going to work for them. And we're going to have some exciting news about landlord-tenant mediation in your community a little bit later. So I just want to put that teaser out there. We also, want to make sure that people have easy access to legal advice at minimum at this point, just to make sure that, they understand what their rights are, but also what their responsibilities are, and help them understand what this legal process is. Next, we have when the complaint is filed. Again, landlord-tenant mediation is a really, really flexible, dynamic intervention that can be used at any point in the eviction process. So again, it can be used here. There's no point in this process where legal advice is not, of value. But this is where we can start to see those partnerships with courts really come in. They can promote those alternative dispute resolutions like landlord-tenant mediation, and they can start to really evaluate, like, what are the steps that both sides are doing to sort of resolve this before it gets to court. And then there's when the summons is served. And so this is a really great opportunity to provide additional information in plain terms to explain where a tenant is in the process. Most people think, if they just get that notice that they have to leave right away, that it's simply the 10-day notice to quit is the eviction. And that's not really the case. There are opportunities to help folks. And then there's, also providing the information to let people know what resources are available in their community, whether it's legal advice, whether it's rental assistance, whether it's, some sort of other support that can, again, help them address any underlying issues. And then, it's really great when the courts are working directly with social service providers so that that connection to resources can be fairly seamless. We've seen some communities where, courts are sharing with local service providers who's being filed against so that they can start and target and provide interventions to those households right away. And then, we get to the hearing. And so this is where, again, expanded legal access is really, really important. There are, some agencies that have created their own sort of legal assistance programs to be a value add to the community in addition to legal services. There are some models that are called Lawyer for a Day, where it's just a lawyer is in-house at the courthouse to provide some assistance and help represent the tenant and help negotiate a resolution with the landlord. There's also day of mediation models that are out there. Some courts we've seen, especially during the pandemic, where they have representatives from social services, they are present at the court to help connect people and sign people up for services right away the day of. And then, of course, making sure that there's consistent judicial guidance to make sure, people are really understanding how all of these efforts work together so that we can support people who are really trying to find solutions as best as possible. And then, there's the point where there's a judgment for a landlord. So again, this is still another point where landlord-tenant mediation can work to help negotiate payment arrangements or move-out arrangements or anything like that. Again, you want agencies on site to assist with any underlying cause of housing instability, whether it's, job loss or a health crisis, anything like that. And then legal assistance in case there's a need to file an appeal. Again, we're going to talk a little bit about the pay and stay window. So again, landlord-tenant mediation is great in this spot because it can help facilitate the conversation to make payment plans or something of that nature. Programs to help support the tenants in addressing underlying causes. There are also programs out there that help address some habitability needs that maybe landlords weren't aware of that they could be accessing. And then, of course, always providing additional information in simple terms to help everyone understand where they are in the eviction process and what their possible next steps are to take. And then there is an appeal. Some cases may be eligible for an appeal, so you definitely want that legal guidance for filing that appeal. We've also seen some communities start to create a housing court at the common pleas level, so that can also help kind of support people through the appeals process. And then there's the order of possession. And again, this is another place where landlord-tenant mediation can help because, again, it can sort of negotiate what that move out looks like. So, the tenant can come up with a plan and transition out well and not have to leave all of their belongings behind. That is going to be at the landlord's expense to clear out and to store for, the 30 days or whatever that's required. For them to hold on to stuff afterwards. So that's the eviction process in a nutshell, and all of the ways that we see an opportunity to disrupt it. And so with that, I am going to hand it over to my coworker, Ji-hun, who is the Research and Education Manager here at the Housing Alliance, who's going to talk about kind of what the data is telling us about what's happening with eviction in Cumberland County. And then we're going to round out today's discussion with a brief update from Maureen Marnations, who is going to talk about the latest eviction prevention resource to be coming to Cumberland County.
Thank you so much, Gail. Let me share my screen. So I'd like to take this presentation just to give you a little bit more of a context on what eviction cases look like, as specifically in Cumberland County, and kind of put a little bit more flesh on the process that Gail just very ably outlined. So let's first look at the number of eviction filings that are made in the county. So this chart shows you each month how many eviction cases were filed in Cumberland County, going back all the way to January 2020 and ending just last month. So some things I want to track here are the relatively high number of filings that were made in the early month of 2020 and the very dramatic plunge as the pandemic started and the court shut down. And through late August of 2021, last year, there was a CDC moratorium that was holding down the number of filings. But after that expired, filings have been increasing generally since then. So as of August the 1st of this year, in 2022, there have been more than 1,000 filings made so far in Cumberland County. And that actually compares to about 663 filings that were made in 2021 to the same date. So the pace of filings has certainly been picking up. And just to put that in a little more context, the dotted line here shows the historical monthly average of filings. So that the dotted line is 100% of how many filings you might have expected that month, averaging out between 2016 and 2019. And we see in the recent month, especially the number of filings has been approaching or been exceeding that level. So we are now back to the pre-pandemic levels of filings, and that is a level where more than 6% of renter households, that is more than 1 in 20 of renter households, received an eviction filing in Cumberland County in 2029 and most likely in 2022 as well. The source for this data is the Legal Services Corporation, which has a really neat website that they track eviction filing numbers from each county in Pennsylvania. When we share these slides, you'll be able to click on the link there and find the website yourself. One important caveat that I do want to mention at the beginning here is that all the cases we'll be talking about are cases filed formally through the courts. So these do not include any displacement that happens outside of the court or the legal process. So any so-called informal evictions will not be counted here. And there might be a fairly large number of those cases are not captured by the court data. So we know that eviction filings are rising, but what can we say about what happens after the case is filed? So in order to learn more about this, we requested data from Pennsylvania state court system. And we were able to obtain data through a public request that covers a period between 2019 up to the May of this year. So a lot of the analysis that we'll share here has been published in our eviction data report that we released earlier this year. But I'll also try to kind of tease in some of the more recent 2022 data whenever we can. I just wanted to start with this data by looking at where evictions are being filed in the county. And here is a map showing every zip code in Cumberland County. And it's colored by the eviction filing rate. So eviction filing rate is simply how many cases are filed per renter household in that zip code. And zip codes that have a filing rate of 5% or greater are colored in this yellow color. So those are zip codes where 1 in 20 renter families or more often are getting an eviction case every year. So this is cases filed in 2021. And we see that zip codes, especially around Shippensburg, around Carlisle, and around Camp Hill and Mechanicsburg, are especially at risk of eviction filings. And so the risk of eviction filing is not spread even throughout the county, even after taking into account the size of the renter population. Just one more caveat: the zip codes are not people, and zip codes often have great diversity communities within them. But this is the kind of the the most detailed look geographically that we can take with the court data that we have. And again, if you follow the link there, you can hover over the interactive map to see rates and filings in each zip code. And here's just a table of the filings and rates for the top 10 highest zip codes in the county by filing rate, showing on the left side cases in 2021 and the right side cases in 2022. And I just put this here to show you that those zip codes are fairly stable. So zip code 17015, which is around Carlisle, are seeing kind of the highest level of filings in the county, as well as other zip codes covering Camp Hill and Shippensburg. And you can see that on the third column here that there are relatively few number of cases that are contributing a lot of cases to the entire county. So after a case is filed, as Gail mentioned, it eventually reaches some sort of judgment or some sort of outcome. And this next chart shows you what those outcomes would be. So this is in 2021. And basically the take-home point from this chart is that plaintiffs that are who are landlords filing the cases are overwhelmingly likely to win their cases. So if for any case that reached some sort of disposition, in 2021, full 3/4 of those cases were won by the plaintiff or the landlord, and less than 1% by the defendant. And about 20% were withdrawn or settled, meaning that both parties agreed or the landlord chose to withdraw the case. And in 2022, the picture is not too different. 68% of cases that reach some sort of disposition are found for the plaintiff, and slightly higher number, about 30% of cases were withdrawn or settled between the parties. Just quickly noting here that less than 2% of the tenants that we see in our data have any legal representation recorded in the case data, and about 5 to 11% of landlords do, depending on the year, have legal representation. So the order of possession is once a landlord receives judgment in their favor, the order of possession is the kind of the legal instrument that allows the actual physical lockout of the tenant, and it's the best kind of proxy we have at this point for whether an actual physical eviction takes place. Just noting though, it may not cover cases where a tenant leaves the property without an order of possession, or cases where a tenant pays and stays and is able to avoid the physical eviction, even with an order of possession. But it is the best proxy we have. And in 2021, about a third of cases filed in Cumberland County resulted in an order of possession. And so far, and in 2019, the figure was even a little higher at 39%. Of course, this may not capture the true rate of displacement because there are other ways that tenants can be displaced, but it does suggest that most cases do not proceed far enough along for a formal legal eviction, which also highlights some of the potential benefit of policies like record sealing and other anti-discrimination policies, where tenants who might not have been subjected to a legal eviction but still have an eviction filing in their record. And this process can happen very quickly. So on average, it takes about 13 days from the landlord filing a case to the case reaching some sort of resolution, usually through a hearing. And it takes around 30 days from the day of filing to an order of possession if one is issued. So it takes really about a month before there's a legal eviction order in the cases where one is issued. And that's a pretty quick timeline. And that's not something that's unique to Cumberland County, but it's pretty similar statewide. One thing we also saw is that only a small minority of cases, given this timeline, have any sort of continuance or any order that's issued by the judge to allow more time for proceedings. And that's about 10 to 15% on any given year have a continuance. And this is important because giving more time often allows resources like rental assistance or sometimes mediation to work through. We also look at how much money the tenants owe in cases where there is a money judgment against them. And that money judgment can include things like costs, fees, any rent in arrears, as well as other damages that the landlord asks for. And the median amount of money judgment is about $2,000, a little bit higher in more recent years. But this tells you that eviction cases are being filed for relatively small amounts of money. And in fact, 17% of all money judgments that were made were less than $1,000, and that's this year. We do see that 94% of cases with some sort of money judgment include rent in arrears. So it doesn't say that rent in arrears is the only issue confronting this case, but it was part of why the landlord brought the case. And one thing that I noticed that I wanted to really highlight is that median rent has been increasing. So for any case, for all cases that report the rent that's paid by the tenant, we saw that the median rent was $906 in 2022, and that's up quite significantly from $825 just last year. So rent increases, we are also seeing that in the eviction data. And the vast majority of cases that are filed involve rent in arrears that are 3 or fewer months of rent, 71% in this year's filings. So one thing we want to do when we present data is always we want to talk about the solutions as well as the problems. So this is just a quick summary of what we found in studying other eviction diversion programs in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So we looked specifically at 2 fairly recent programs, one operating in Chester County called Eviction Prevention Court, and another operating in the city of Reading in Berks County. And we just wanted to show you what some of the impacts of eviction diversion programs could be. So both of the programs were launched in 2020. The one in Chester County was launched by the Friends Association there, and both are entirely voluntary programs that take place in specific local courts called MDJs in their jurisdictions. And they provide pre-hearing context to tenants with information about the assistance that's available, help at eviction hearing. As Gail mentioned, there is kind of day of legal assistance available. And there's also connections to other services like rental assistance. And both of the programs proactively reach out to the landlords and are able to negotiate a lot of cases so that the cases are settled with a withdrawal before reaching a hearing. So the data we looked at specifically involve the case outcomes as well as the orders of possession. So let me just walk you through this somewhat complex graph. So both of the programs, as I mentioned, started in 2020. So we're looking at essentially before and after picture. So top is cases filed in 2019, and the bottom is cases filed in 2021. So before the program started in 2019, basically we don't see any differences between the cases, between the courts that are participating in the program versus cases in other courts in the same county. So again, the vast majority of cases are likely to be found for the plaintiff. But after the program started, there's a pretty significant divergence that opens up between the cases that are participating in the courts that are participating in the program and courts that are not participating in the program. So cases in eviction diversion courts are much more likely to be withdrawn or settled in Chester County instead of being outright filed for the plaintiff, and which allows the and this is due to agreements being made between the tenants and the landlords or their attorneys. So cases are almost 3 times more likely to be withdrawn and about 2.5 times more likely to be settled. And orders of possession are much less common in the courts that are operating with the eviction diversion program. Even though before the program started, there wasn't much of a difference between those participating in the programs and others in the same county. And we see very similar results for the program that's operating in Berks County, which is a fairly different community from Chester County. And this one covers the northeastern part of Reading and operates within 1 courtroom. And we heard from the people involved in the program that tenants are much more likely to be present at the hearing after the program started. And that allows folks to take advantage of the representation that's available to them, as well as to able to be present their case and get connections to other services. And here we're looking at the same kind of before and after picture. The only thing that's different here for the Reading program is that the gray bar that's added is for cases filed in other courts in Reading. So the closest comparison here is between other courts in Reading and the yellow bars, which are the cases from the court that's participating in the program. So again, before the program started in 2019, very little difference between the courts, but after the program started, cases are almost 4 times more likely to be withdrawn, and judgments defendant are 3 times more likely. That also translates to orders of possession. So far fewer families are at risk of being subjected to an illegal eviction. And we are currently looking more about how these programs are working in 2022, and we hope to have a fuller report that updates the data to 2022 later this year. We've also published some case studies highlighting how these programs work, and I can put those in the chat after my presentation. But you can also check out our eviction data report at this link, which I'll also put in the chat. And if you have any questions or comments, please let me know. And that's my email address. Thank you. Gail, I think back to you.
Thank you so much. I just want to do a quick check and see if there's any questions from folks who are attending. Doesn't look like we have any, but our next presenter is Maureen Marr-Nations. Oh, we do have a comment that says the information is great. Thank you. I agree that the information is great. Jihan has done an amazing job synthesizing a lot of information. So with that, I want to introduce our third speaker. This is Maureen Marr-Nations with Community Partners for Change, and she is going to talk about some exciting updates that are going to be happening here on the ground in Cumberland County.
Thank you, Gail. Welcome, everybody. I just wanted to give you an update on what's happening, as Gail said, in Cumberland County with the mediation program. The Housing Authority and Redevelopment, the Housing Redevelopment Authority, Cumberland County, was granted a $15,000 grant to start a mediation program. They asked me to start that program to gather people to participate, to get the training done. And we've done that. I've had 14 to 15 volunteers sign up to participate in this program, and it consists of people from school liaisons, law professors, law students, community members. We have people from the Mid-Penn Legal who have participated in this program. We also have social service agency staff, mental health agency, housing professors, landlords, people with lived experience. So we have a pretty good representation across the community of people that are willing to participate in this program and assist tenants and landlords alike. We have 7 people that have gone through a certified training process for mediation. And we currently are looking at starting a pre-filing program. Pre-filing means that we hope to gain the participation of both landlords and tenants before the filing process is started, so that both parties avoid any legal cost, and also the tenants avoid having a eviction filing on their record. This program in Cumberland County has the goal to help landlords as well as tenants. The goal, of course, is to keep the tenants in the house, as well as making sure that the landlords are protected in their investment and are made whole by any situations that might arise. We will handle cases that need mediation due to a lack of payment, as well as any other violations of the lease. So we're not just looking at trying to take cases that somebody is in arrears of rent, but any way that we might be able to assist the landlord and tenant in making sure that people remain housed. Last week, I had a meeting with the president judge of Cumberland County, who is Judge Guido, and also I met with Judge Peck. I presented the program to them, and Judge Guido and Judge Peck approved the program, said they gave it their full support. And Judge Guido instructed or asked Judge Peck to put out a letter to the MDJs as well as the others throughout the court system, including their staff, that this program he does fully support and would like to see utilized in Cumberland County. Now that's a big help for us because we can put our materials and information sheets in the offices and the staff can give them out. But when other court officials know that the president judge of the county supports this program and would like to see it be successful, then they take notice of that. And hopefully their support will be given and we will be able to assist landlords and tenants before they get involved in the court system. So what we will do is we have printed material that is in the form of a brochure, which tells about the mediation process and how it would work and how you would contact us. We will also be providing contact cards so they can simply have that if they would like, that would give them the information to contact the mediation team for Cumberland County. Once they contact us, then one of our volunteers will reach out and schedule a mediation time that's agreeable to both the landlord and the tenant. And we will go ahead and start the process of mediation. We can do the mediation either by Zoom or in person if they would like. Dickinson Law School Community Law Clinic has offered a space to hold the mediations in person if they would like to meet that way. And then the mediator will meet with both parties, find out the situation, and start the process. The parties to the mediation will sign a consent to mediate, which just reminds them that the mediator is not a legal representation, is not offering legal advice to the parties. It's simply a neutral third party that is going to help them try to resolve the issue and get back on track. Once that's done, then the meetings that take place will hopefully come up with the resolution to the problem. And then we will present them with an addendum to the lease that spells out exactly what they have both agreed to through the mediation process. And they're welcome to take that to an attorney if they wish to have it looked at before they sign it. It's up to them. And what happens with it if something should change or something is not adhered to, again, goes back to the parties. We can reinstate the mediation and begin again to try to resolve the problem, or they can proceed legally if they wish. So what they do with the mediation is really in their hands. We are here to offer landlords and tenants an opportunity to solve the problem without going to court. And we hope to begin our first mediation in October. So that's kind of summary of where we are and what we hope to do. I'll be glad to furnish any information to anybody if they would like. They simply can send me an email and I'll put my email in the chat in a few minutes, and I'll be glad to forward any information to them. But if you have a client or you're working with somebody else, or I just happen to know someone that may benefit from a mediation as opposed to going to court, if it's gotten to that point, please reach out to me and let me know, and I'll have somebody on our team reach out to them. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Maureen. That's very, very exciting. And it's really exciting that you're able to start it with, 7 mediators already. That really is, good to see that degree of scale right out of the box. So I just wanted to, do we have any questions or comments or points of discussion from folks attending? We have a question. Do you hear about clients when they are in mediation? Is the focus on how they can resolve or on the reason? You want to take that one, Maureen?
Sure, but I'm sorry, could you say it one more time?
The question is, do you hear about clients when they are in mediation? Is the focus on how they can resolve or on the reason? So I'm assuming this person is a social service provider. So if they were to refer a client to you, Like, what would be the feedback loop to them as the case manager?
As the case manager, we would let them know that we are scheduling a mediation, and whether the information that would go back to them would depend upon their client. All information garnered in the process of mediation is confidential. So the two parties would meet with us, and anything that is said during mediation, during that whole process, remains confidential and is not discussed by the mediator. So if their client would like to get back to them and discuss what is happening or what did happen in the mediation, they certainly are free to do that. But we as the mediators would not relate that to others. Now, do we listen to the reason? Obviously we do. The reason that would bring them to the table for mediation, of course, is vitally important to solving the issue at hand. So, but what happens in the mediation process is strictly confidential.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions from folks? All right, well, people are thinking of their discussions or their questions. I have some discussion that I want to have with my fellow panelists here. So going back to some of the data that you showed, Shihan, around how many cases end up going to an order of possession, which we know, it's only a proxy for how many displacements could be happening. But thinking about that, it seemed kind of like a low number. So to me, I kind of think that maybe that tells you that when landlords are filing for an eviction, that their real motivation is not necessarily to just solely get somebody out, that there is, again, a desire and an opportunity to help find a resolution.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how I would also describe it. So oftentimes an eviction is filed kind of as a means to an end. And oftentimes, of course, it's preceded by a breakdown in communication. So, programs like mediation could help bridge that and address by addressing the breakdown in communication. It also means that that case may never end up being filed. I see there's a question in the chat about whether is there a link to the 2022 data. So the answer to that is there will be. So we are currently, we have only data through the first 5 months of the year. So we want to gain a little more complete data before we update the report, but we will absolutely do that. And if you subscribe to our Housing Alliance email list, then you'll find about it as soon as that's ready.
In the meantime, are there any other sort of resources out there that people can look up? What are data resources on eviction filings and eviction overall, besides us, which, I'm going to say is the best, but I'm biased.
Sure. So as I mentioned kind of in the beginning of my presentation, the Legal Services Corporation publishes a fairly up-to-date eviction filing tracker. And let me put that in the chat there. So if you follow that, you can find basically the most recent data they have available is 2 weeks ago. So how many cases were being filed as recently as this month.
Great. Is there any final thoughts or any other questions?
Gail, I just wanted to add one other thing. There's a very good resource on landlord and tenant rights that it's a guideline, consumer guideline to landlord tenant rights that's put out by the Office of Attorney General for the state of Pennsylvania. And it is a good overall review of what landlord tenant rights are in the state of Pennsylvania. For those working with clients, it just gives you a good general overview and answer to some of the commonly asked questions. That can be obtained through the Office of the Attorney General. I'll also send out a link. If anybody would like the guide, just let me know and I actually can send them the link to the guide itself.
Great. It looks like we have some thoughts coming through. So we have a comment here. please encourage your clients to contact their school district homeless liaisons. Clients have extensive entitlements under the federal McKinney-Vento Act for homeless students. So that's a good piece of helpful information. Thank you, Angelina. And then we also have a question from Lori. Once I get mediation, what type of guarantee does a landlord have that the tenant is going to follow through with the resolution plan? Could this just be used as a delay for the tenant?
Well, I think it could be used as a delay on the tenants for the tenant, but I don't believe that they will come to mediation and go through the process just as an attempt to delay an eviction. Is there a guarantee? No, there isn't a guarantee. However, the resolution that both the tenant and the landlord agree to is signed and considered an addendum to the lease. So it is, we do not file it legally with the courts, but if either party violates that resolution, as I said, they could come back to mediation if they wanted to, or if they wanted to pursue it legally, they could introduce it to the courts as a binding resolution.
I will also add to that we at the Housing Alliance have done a lot of research around landlord-tenant mediation as a practice. And what we have found is that, about 80% of the mediations that take place, and this is looking at programs before the pandemic in other parts of the country, but about 80% of the mediations that take place come to a successful resolution, an agreement that both sides are happy with. And then the other thing that's really remarkable about mediation is that there is an incredibly high compliance rate, like above 90% of both sides are compliant to what they said, to what they were going to agree to as part of that agreement plan. So what we're seeing is that these plans they're far more reasonable. They're far more likely to set both sides up for success. And people really do walk away satisfied with the outcome and feeling like they have control over the outcome versus just a judge handing down a verdict.
I think that tenants find the mediation process less intimidating. They feel like they're a little bit more on equal footing with the landlord than in a court setting. And thus, mediation often leads to opening channels of communication that may not have been there previously. And I think that's part of the reason that we see such a success rate in the mediation process, is that both parties leave the mediation feeling like they've kind of broken new ground into how to work with each other.
That's a very, very good point. I think that's also, there's a lot of research out there that shows, and, we have it on the Housing Alliance website, that really shows that, not only are our mediations successful at preventing the eviction, but they're actually pretty effective at restoring that business relationship between the landlord and tenant so that they can go forward, which is also pretty desirable for most folks, and not something that you're going to see if the eviction actually goes all the way through. We have another question. Will mediations occur during evenings and weekends?
We will try to meet with the people participating when their schedules allow for it. Obviously, given that most of the people are volunteers, well, everybody's a volunteer, and they have other jobs that will lend itself to having some of the evenings and things like that, other times outside of normal work hours. So yes, we will do our best to meet with tenants and landlords when their schedules can coincide with the mediators.
All right, well, if there is not any more questions, I just want to say thank you again to my co-presenters, Chi-Han and Maureen, for some really, really great presentations and discussion. Of course, another big thank you to the Cumberland County Bar Association for all of their work in helping put this event together. We are really, really appreciative. We did record today's webinar, so we will share recording and we can share all of the slides and information, and of course include supplemental information that was referenced in today's presentation. Oh, it looks like we have a couple of questions in the Q&A that I missed. Let's see, somebody asked for booklets, so we'll be sure to save that. Would you consider having the parties agree to permit entry of judgment or failure to comply with a mediation agreement?
That will be discussed, but that there again, that is up to the parties involved.
Right, so they really, the two sides really do have control over what's going to happen with the agreement.
That's correct.
Excellent. Well, that brings us to the end of our hour. I want to thank you all for joining us for today's presentation, and we look forward to staying in touch and seeing all of the great work that happens with the new mediation program.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Take care, everybody.